I removed my daughter's bedroom door because she won't stop slamming it. It started about 6 months ago. Every argument, every little thing that didn't go her way, slam. Every time I asked her to do dishes, slam. When I told her she couldn't go to some party where I knew there'd be drinking, slam. The sound would shake the whole upstairs. My coffee mug fell off my nightstand twice from the vibrations. My husband Dave kept telling me to ignore it. He'd say, "Kids go through phases. She'll grow out of it." Easy for him to say since he's usually at work when most of the slamming happens. I'm the one working from home trying to take client calls while slam echoes through the house. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Emma wanted to borrow my car to drive to her friend Jess's house. I said no because she got a speeding ticket the week before, and we agreed her driving privileges were suspended. She started screaming about how unfair I was, how I never trust her, how all her friends think I'm psycho. Then she stomped upstairs and slam, but this time was different. This time I heard something crack. I went up to check and there was a split running down the door frame. The wood was actually damaged. That door had been slammed so hard and so many times that it was breaking the house. I stood there staring at that crack and something just snapped in me. I marched to the garage, grabbed Dave's screwdriver set, and went back upstairs. Emma was inside her room blasting music, probably expecting me to yell at her through the door like usual. Instead, I started unscrewing the hinges. It took me about 10 minutes. Emma didn't even notice until I was lifting the door off the frame. Then her music stopped real quick. "Mom, what are you doing?" she called out. "Solving a problem," I said, carrying her door downstairs to the garage. She appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, mouth hanging open. "You can't take my door. I need privacy." "You lost door privileges when you damaged the house," I told her. "Privacy is earned, not guaranteed." The next few days were interesting. Emma tried everything. She hung a bedsheet across the doorway, which I took down. She moved her dresser to block the opening, so I moved it back while she was at school. She even tried staying at her friend's house, but Jess's mom called me asking what was going on. By day 4, Emma was sitting on her bed when I got home from the grocery store. No music, no phone, just sitting there. "This is embarrassing," she said. "What if someone comes over?" "Then maybe you'll think twice before destroying property," I said. I wasn't destroying anything. I was just mad. The door frame says otherwise. That's when she actually looked at the crack she'd made. I could see her face change when she realized she'd actually damaged something. Day 7 was when things got real. Emma's boyfriend, Tyler, came over to work on some school project. I watched from the kitchen as he walked upstairs, expecting to go into her room and just stopped dead when he saw the empty doorway. Where's your door?" I heard him ask. Emma's voice got all quiet. "My mom took it. Why?" There was a long pause. "Because I kept slamming it." Tyler didn't say anything for a minute. Then I heard him go, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." Even her boyfriend thought it was reasonable. That's when I knew I wasn't completely crazy. It took 3 weeks total. 3 weeks of Emma having to face the consequences of her actions every single day. No dramatic exits, no satisfying slam to punctuate her anger. She had to deal with her emotions like an actual person. The day I put the door back was a Wednesday. I didn't make a big announcement or anything. I just carried it upstairs and started screwing the hinges back on while she was at school. When Emma got home and saw it, she stood in the doorway for a long time, just running her hand along the wood. "Thank you," she said quietly. I looked up from fixing the door frame crack. "Think you can keep it on the hinges this time?" She nodded. "Yeah, I think I can." I removed my daughter's bedroom door because she wouldn't stop slamming it. It started about 6 months ago. Slow at first, like a storm you think will pass. But then it became her answer to everything. Do the dishes. Slam. Turn your music down. Slam. You can't go out tonight. Slam. Each one louder than the last. The sound would shake the whole upstairs floor like a mini earthquake. Once, my coffee mug actually slid off my nightstand and shattered. I remember just staring at the broken pieces thinking, this can't keep happening. Dave, my husband, said the same thing he always says. She's a teenager. Let it go, she'll grow out of it. Easy for him to say. He's never home when it happens. He doesn't hear the walls rattle while I'm on client calls, pretending everything's fine as another door slams loud enough to make the cat hide under the couch. Then came the Tuesday that finally broke me. Emma wanted to borrow my car to go to her friend Jess's house. I said no calmly because she'd gotten a speeding ticket just last week. We agreed, no car for a month. But in that teenage logic that defies every law of reason, she decided that meant I was ruining her life. She yelled. She cried. She called me unfair, controlling, even psycho, her new favorite word for me. Then, like the finale of some dramatic teenage performance, she stomped up the stairs and slammed the door so hard it cracked the frame. When I went up and saw that long, splintered line down the wood, something inside me snapped too. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just went to the garage, grabbed Dave's screwdriver, and came back upstairs. The music was blasting behind the door. I started unscrewing the hinges, one by one. Emma didn't notice until I lifted the door off the frame. Her music cut off mid-song. "Mom? What are you doing?" "Solving a problem," I said, holding the door in my hands like a trophy of calm authority. Her face went pale. "You can't take my door. I need privacy." I set it against the wall. "You lost door privileges when you damaged the house. Privacy is earned, not automatic." The days that followed were interesting. She tried everything. First, she hung a bedsheet like some makeshift curtain. I took it down. Then she dragged her dresser across the doorway. I pushed it back while she was at school. She even tried sleeping at Jess's for 2 nights, until Jess's mom called, asking what was going on. By day 4, I came home to find Emma sitting quietly on her bed. No yelling, no headphones, no door to hide behind. "This is embarrassing," she muttered. "What if someone comes over?" "Then maybe you'll remember this feeling next time you think about slamming things," I said. For the first time, she didn't argue. Just looked at the crack in the frame, really looked at it, and I could see it hit her that her anger had left a literal mark on the house. A week later, her boyfriend Tyler came over to work on a project. From the kitchen, I heard his footsteps stop at her doorway. Where's your door?" he asked. "My mom took it," she mumbled. "Why?" There was a pause, then a quiet, honest answer. "Because I kept slamming it." He didn't laugh, didn't act shocked. He just said, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." That was the moment she got it. No lecture from me, no yelling. Just that tiny moment of realization that even her peers thought it was fair. 3 weeks. That's how long it took. 3 weeks without a door, without the dramatic punctuation of a slam to end every argument. 3 weeks of sitting with her anger instead of throwing it at the walls. When I finally put the door back, it wasn't some big ceremony. Just a quiet Wednesday afternoon. I reattached the hinges while she was at school, fixed the cracked frame as best I could, and left it there. Solid, but a little scarred. When Emma came home, she stopped in the hallway. Her hand brushed over the smooth wood, fingers tracing the repaired crack. "Thank you," she said softly. I looked up from my tools. "Think you can keep it on the hinges this time?" She nodded. "Yeah, I think I can." And for once, I believed her. Because sometimes the best lessons aren't the ones we shout. They're the ones that echo in silence, right where a slammed door used to be, story. On the day of my daughter's wedding, I found my photo at the gate with a sign, "Do not let him in." I turned and left in silence. 4 hours later, she realized her wedding had ended when I went home. Chapter 1, The Man Not on the Guest List. The late afternoon sun bathed the wedding venue in golden light as I stepped out of the taxi. The music was already playing faintly inside. Soft piano and violins echoing joy I once imagined I'd be a part of. I took a deep breath, straightened my suit, and glanced down at the small envelope in my hand. Inside it was a letter I wrote to my daughter last week just in case. A habit I picked up from raising her alone. Always be prepared for the worst, but hope for the best. I smiled as I approached the gate. This was supposed to be our moment. I had raised her from the day her mother left. Changed diapers, braided hair, attended every school play, even when I was exhausted from double shifts, paid her tuition by selling my motorcycle. She used to say I was her whole world, but now, as I reached the front gate of the venue, everything stopped because right there, taped directly onto the row iron bars, was my photo. And beneath it, in bold red marker, "Do not let him in." At first, I blinked. Thought it was a joke, a prank, maybe a surprise entrance plan. Then a security guard standing nearby stiffened, clearly recognizing me. He stepped forward awkwardly. "Sir, I'm really sorry. We were given clear instructions by the bride's family." That's when it hit me. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, not a prank, a deliberate choice. I looked one more time at the sign. My photo, the ink still fresh, my name blacked out. I said nothing. I simply turned around and walked back to the waiting taxi in complete silence. I didn't send a text, didn't call, didn't even let the driver know what happened. I just whispered home and sat there watching the venue shrink in the distance along with every memory that once made me proud to be a father. Chapter 2. The Forgotten Years. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my suit, didn't pour myself a drink, didn't collapse on the couch like some dramatic movie father. I just stood in the hallway looking at the wall. The same wall filled with memories. All of her. Her baby shoes still framed. Her kindergarten painting still taped with cracked masking tape. Her college acceptance letter from NYU, the one she sobbed about on the phone saying, "Dad, I couldn't have done this without you." And now I wasn't good enough to even sit at the back row of her wedding. The years they forgot. People like to romanticize single fathers. Movies make it look noble, inspiring, a bit of comic struggle, maybe a tearful hug at graduation. They don't show the nights I came home to a crying toddler after working double shifts at the warehouse. The nights I stitched her costumes by hand because she wanted to be Hermione and the store-bought ones were too expensive. The times I fed her with ketchup and rice because payday was still 3 days away. They don't show how I gave up everything. Remarage, traveling, starting over because I didn't want her to ever feel like she was second to anyone. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. She met her mother again. The wedding planning I wasn't part of. A year ago, she reconnected with her mom, the woman who walked out when she was 4. No note, no custody battle, just gone. When I asked my daughter how she felt about it, she said, "She deserves a second chance, Dad. People change." I smiled because what else could I do? Then came the wedding planning. I was too old-fashioned, she said. Too simple, too practical, too controlling. I swallowed my pride again. Offered to pay for her dress for the venue, she refused. Her mother apparently had a new husband. Rich, successful, connected. They wanted to take care of it. "Just show up in a nice suit, Dad," she said last month. "I still want you to walk me down the aisle." Liar. A letter never sent that envelope in my hand back at the gate. It was my wedding gift. Not cash, not jewelry, not even advice, just a letter, a memory written by her when she was 8. "Dear Daddy, when I grow up, I want to marry someone just like you." I had kept it for 20 years. Framed it once, read it every Father's Day, kept it safe through every move, every heartbreak, every hardship. And now I almost gave it to her. Almost. But I didn't. I placed it gently on the coffee table, turned away, and in that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It began to shift. Because if they wanted to forget everything I'd done, maybe it was time I reminded them who I really was. Chapter 3, The Silence Before the Storm. 3 days passed. Not a word from my daughter. Not even a "why didn't you show up?" The silence said everything. She was pretending I didn't exist. Just like they'd all decided. Her mother, her rich stepfather, their new picture-perfect family. But what they forgot was this. I may not have wealth. I may not have connections. But I've always been the man who thinks ahead. And this time, I had prepared for exactly this moment. The estate they thought they owned. See, 6 months ago, my health had taken a hit. A small heart scare. Nothing fatal, but enough to remind me that I wasn't immortal. That's when I made the decision to finally deal with my parents' estate. A sprawling 5-bedroom property with lake access and a detached art studio worth just under $900,000. I inherited it years ago, but never touched it. I'd lived humbly, working as a local repairman, raising my daughter in a modest rental. But after the heart scare, I consulted a lawyer, a smart one. We created a trust, not just a will. The estate was no longer in my name. It was in the trust's name. And the trust was controlled by me and one very unexpected co-rusty. Someone from my past, just in case they tried anything when I was too old or too gone to stop them. The paper trail. I had heard rumblings, whispers through mutual family friends that my brother, yes, my own brother, had recently taken an unusual interest in the property. Turns out my mother, who had long resented me for stealing her grandchild when my ex left, had been whispering in his ear. "Your brother's going to die alone. He doesn't need that big house. Wouldn't it be better if it stayed in the family with someone stable?" 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a copy of a forged transfer of deed in the mail anonymous envelope. I knew then they were planning something, so I waited. The movers arrive. It was Friday morning, 11:07 a.m. A white moving van pulled into the long gravel driveway of the estate. I saw it from the upstairs window sipping my coffee. A familiar figure stepped out. My brother, and right behind him, my mother holding a clipboard. They were laughing, grinning, pointing. I watched as the movers opened the truck. And then I walked downstairs, opened the door, and stepped onto the porch, calm, collected. But I wasn't alone. Standing beside me just behind the screen door was a sharply dressed man in his early 40s, and in his hand a thick black folder labeled in bold letters Trustee Documentation and Injunction Notice. Do not proceed. My mother stopped laughing. My brother blinked, and I finally spoke. You really thought I'd let that happen? Chapter 4. The Man on the Porch. The man standing beside me, tall, crisp navy suit, silver tie pin, glinting in the sun, was named Richard Monroe, trust attorney, former federal prosecutor, and perhaps most importantly, an old Army buddy. We hadn't seen each other in years, but when I called him 6 months ago and told him about my concerns, how I was being slowly edged out of my family, how I didn't trust what might happen if I got sick or passed unexpectedly, he said 3 words. I've seen this before. And then we got to work. That's illegal and you know it. Richard stepped forward, opening the black folder with practiced ease. His voice was calm but icy. Miss Turner. Mr. Turner, he said, addressing my mother and brother. You are currently trespassing on a private trust-owned property. You are in violation of 2 court-backed injunctions that were filed in anticipation of this very move. My brother looked confused, but my mother, her smile faltered. This house belongs to our family, she said quickly. You can't throw us off our own land. Richard didn't flinch. Actually, you tried to transfer a deed fraudulently without the beneficiary's knowledge or consent. That's not just illegal. That's a felony. And I have the county clerk's rejection notice right here. He tapped the second document in the folder. My brother stepped back as if slapped. Should I call the sheriff? From inside the house, my phone buzzed. A camera notification. Motion detected at the side entrance. They had hired another mover to sneak around back. I turned to Richard and said loud enough for everyone to hear. Should I call the sheriff now or after they try to break the window? My brother cursed under his breath. My mother hissed, This isn't over. But even the movers, once smug, laughing, looked nervous. Richard tilted his head slightly and said, If you leave now, you'll walk away. If you don't, well, I've already called the sheriff. He'll be here in 10, the freeze. They stood frozen at the bottom of the steps. 2 people who thought they'd won, who thought they'd bullied the quiet one. The soft-spoken dad who always paid the bill bit his tongue and kept the peace. And for a moment, just one breathless moment, I saw the full horror dawn on them. I wasn't the fool, I was the storm they didn't see coming. Chapter 5, Her Wedding. My silence. 4 hours after my mother and brother were escorted off the property by the sheriff, I was home barefoot in the kitchen, heating leftovers. The silence in the house was soothing. For once, I wasn't fighting for space, for peace, for sanity. Then came the text from my daughter, Sarah. Where are you? I stared at it. No apology, no explanation, just a question, not even a dad. She knew what they had done. She knew about the fake deed transfer, and still she went ahead with the wedding. Still sent me an invitation to sit in the back as a guest while my brother would walk her down the aisle. I didn't reply. Where's the father of the bride? Later that night, a mutual friend who had attended the wedding sent me a photo. The moment the music started, guests standing, the aisle empty. The officiant looked confused. Is the father of the bride not here? He had whispered. My daughter stood, bouquet trembling in her hands. My brother had disappeared too, likely licking his wounds after being publicly embarrassed at the estate. So she stood alone. My mother whispered something from the front row, but it wasn't help. It was blame. You did this. And Sarah knew it because the one man who always showed up had finally chosen not to. The collapse. The wedding went on technically, but the bride barely smiled. The groom looked stiff. Whispers circled like vultures about the family drama. About the empty aisle, about the father, whose name was now being whispered with a different kind of weight. Respect. Afterward, guests began to leave early. The reception was half full, and the bouquet, she never even threw it. She went home early in silence, just like I had left. Chapter 6. The letter she found on her doorstep. 2 days after the wedding, a courier dropped off a plain manila envelope at Sarah's condo. No name, no return address, just a heavy silence and my handwriting on the front. She didn't open it immediately. Maybe she thought it was another invoice. Maybe she hoped it was an apology. But when she finally tore it open, the air left her lungs. The letter. Dear Sarah, I didn't come to your wedding because I wasn't invited. You may have sent a card, but the moment you allowed your uncle to steal what your grandparents left for both of us without even asking me for the truth, you made your choice. And that's fine. You're an adult. You can make choices now. But choices come with consequences. This house was meant to be your inheritance too. Half of it, at least. Your grandparents built it with their bare hands. I maintained it with mine. But when your mother and uncle tried to take it in your name, I realized you were no longer my daughter. You were a silent partner in betrayal. I loved you every day of your life. I held you when you cried over scraped knees, boy troubles, lost jobs. I never missed a single birthday until now. Now I'm done bleeding for people who offer knives in return. I hope your wedding photos remind you of the day you walked the aisle alone, because that loneliness, that was the weight of my absence, and that was your choice too. Dad, her world crumbled. According to a friend who spoke to the Courier later, Sarah sat on her porch for 2 hours, motionless. She clutched the letter like it was an obituary, because in some ways it was. It was the death of who she used to be in her father's eyes, and worse, she couldn't even blame him. Chapter 7. What the wedding guests didn't know, and the legacy she lost forever. As Sarah sat broken on the porch, clutching the letter from her father, the aftershocks of her choices were only just beginning to ripple. At the wedding, everything had looked perfect. A beautiful venue, glowing bride, elegant ceremony, laughter, applause, champagne. But what none of the guests knew was this. There was no honeymoon, there was no estate, there was no inheritance, there was no proud father walking the bride down the aisle moment, a wedding without a blessing. Sarah's new husband, Daniel, had asked her hours before the ceremony. So, when does your dad get here? She had forced a smile. He said he might be late. He never came. And when the guests whispered about the empty father's chair at the front row, her mother simply shrugged. He's being dramatic. But they didn't know. They didn't know that 2 days before Sarah and her mother had signed papers, secretly transferring the family estate into Sarah's name after trying to strong-arm her father into letting go of the past. They didn't know the man they were all smiling for had just lost everything, and yet was still the one who held all the power. The truth. They ignored Sarah's grandfather in his final years had made one request to her father. Protect the land, protect the house, keep it in the family, but not in greedy hands. What Sarah, her uncle, and even her mother didn't know was this. Years ago, her father had quietly moved the estate into a revocable trust, one designed specifically to protect against hostile takeovers, forced signs, and family betrayal. The moment they filed that forged deed, they activated a legal trigger that froze the property and issued a fraud alert. The porch encounter, the man with the folder. When Sarah and her mother had arrived with movers that day, expecting to take over the house by brute force, they didn't expect to see a man in a tailored suit standing on the porch, arms folded. Next to him, an armed sheriff's deputy and a file folder. He handed her a copy of a legal injunction. Due to attempted fraudulent transfer of a protected trust estate, this property is under legal lock. Any attempted entry will be prosecuted. Sarah's mother sputtered. This can't be legal. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. It is. You're free to call your own counsel, but I wouldn't recommend touching a single box. The price of betrayal. The movers packed up their truck and drove away. Her mother stood red-faced, jaw clenched. Sarah. She sat on the curb, eyes glazed, watching the house she thought was hers drift out of reach. But it never was hers. Not after what she tried to do. Not after the silence she gave when her father was pushed out of his own life. Final words. Later that night, a small envelope arrived at the house. It contained only one sentence handwritten by her father. You may have thrown a wedding, Sarah, but I buried a relationship. And just like that, her wedding became the funeral for something far more sacred. A father's love. Final chapter, a father's peace. A daughter's silence. 2 years later, the house stood quiet again, but not empty. The garden bloomed, not because anyone had planted new flowers, but because old roots ran deep, just like the man inside it. John, now grayer, but lighter in spirit, leaned back in his porch chair with a quiet smile. The estate was no longer just a place. It was a sanctuary, not because it was grand, but because he had reclaimed its dignity. A letter never sent in his study drawer sat an envelope unsealed, unsent. It began, "Sarah, if you had just come to me not as a schemer, not as someone demanding inheritance, but as a daughter who wanted to talk, I would have given you everything, not money but time, wisdom, love, a father's protection." But he never mailed it because some bridges once burned deliberately must be left behind as reminders, not regrets. Sarah's side. She never returned. Not on birthdays, not on Christmas, not when her marriage fell apart a year later after Daniel found out about her manipulations. Her mother eventually moved in with her sister across town, bitter and broke, blaming everyone but herself. Sarah did visit the property once. She parked down the road, watched the house from a distance through the windshield, eyes red, hands gripping the steering wheel. She never got out of the car, and John, who saw her from the porch, never walked toward her, because he understood forgiveness is always on the table, but trust must be earned, not demanded. A lesson carved in stone. Near the garden, under a flowering tree, John had placed a bench. On its back was a small plaque that read, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind in wealth. It's how people remember your presence." Every morning he'd sit there, not waiting for anyone, not hoping for reconciliation, just at peace. Final reflection. This wasn't a story about revenge through anger or violence. This was about dignity, about quiet strength, about walking away from betrayal, not to punish, but to protect what truly matters. And in doing so, John gave himself the greatest revenge of all, a peaceful life free from the toxic weight of those who didn't value him. Why was this revenge perfectly justified?